In a recent lecture, Professor Quack stated, raising the minimum wage reduces overall worker welfare. Do you agree? Well, there's a couple things we can look at here with respect to this question. The first has to do with elasticity. So even if we assume a competitive labor market, so here's the quantity of labor and here's the wage, if we have a relatively inelastic demand for labor, where here is our equilibrium quantity of labor, and this is our wage, and then we impose a minimum wage, say here, then the quantity of labor that's going to be demanded is going to be here. It doesn't decrease very much. So our wage rises a lot and the quantity of labor declines. We could extend on this, the effects on this, the overall revenue or the total income that's going to be earned by workers in this particular industry before it is this shaded region here. And so we've got a slightly smaller quantity of labor hired and a relatively lower wage. And then the new overall income is going to be here. And so overall, the total share of income that's going to workers is going to be increased. So if we have inelastic labor demand, then you can make a strong argument that raising the minimum wage increases worker welfare. The other element to look at is monopsony. Now, a monopsony is a market where there's a single, in this case, employer, buyer of the labor. So we'll have a demand curve, which we know equals marginal revenue product, and a supply curve. And if this is a competitive market, then we know that this would be the quantity of labor competitive, and this would be the quantity of labor, either the wage for the competitive wage. Now, monopsonies, as we've demonstrated before, they face a marginal expenditure on labor that lies above the supply curve. They're looking to maximize their profits from hiring an additional unit of labor, and so they'll do that when marginal revenue equals marginal expenditure. And so the monopsonist is looking to hire this quantity of labor, and the price, the monopsonist, is able to hire that quantity of labor at this much lower price. So if you could impose a minimum wage that's above that price but not too high, then in fact you can increase both the wage and the quantity of labor that gets hired. Now, the ideal place to set the minimum wage in those conditions would be at the competitive wage. So this would be here. The quantity of labor would increase to here. The wage would increase to the minimum wage. And now, obviously, you've got not only a higher quantity of labor, but a higher minimum wage. And if we wanted to do the same things, the total income before we had under the monopsony is the quantity of labor times the wage, and the total income now is much, much larger. So again, in conditions of monopsony or monopsony-like conditions where you have an oligopsony or something, market along those lines, and raising a minimum wage can increase the total quantity of labor hired and the wage as well. And this answer would also want to look at evidence that we examined in various meta-analyses that demonstrate that at least over the range of minimum wages that have been examined, that overall there doesn't seem to be much impact negative impact at all on the quantity of labor hired. But of course, wages going up mean then people aren't losing their jobs, wages are higher, worker welfare is going to increase.